The Singapore squeeze. Are we living the dream or facing a nightmare? Is the cost of living in Singapore driving us to the brink? Now I realize that's a question whispered more often than screamed in our meticulously clean, perfectly efficient city-state. But let's be honest, in Singapore, even the air we breathe feels like it comes with a price tag attached. And don't even think about taking a leisurely stroll on the grass unless you've paid your grass tax, metaphorically speaking, of course. Look, the Singapore government has built a remarkably successful nation, but it's a system that seems to have a fundamental distrust of laziness. Productivity isn't just encouraged. It's basically the only mode of survival. HDB, home of dreams or debt dungeon. So you want to buy a flat in Singapore? Adorable. You must be new here. Let's talk HDB. Those government-built housing blocks that a solid 80% of us call home. Now, on the surface, it seems like a good deal, right? Government-subsidized housing, what could go wrong? Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because the HDB journey is less of a breezy stroll in the park and more like an obstacle course designed by a loan shark with a penchant for paperwork. You see, even with government help, you're looking at forking over enough money to make your eyeballs sweat. We're talking enough cash to buy a small island in some countries, or at least a decent-sized yacht. And don't even get me started on the wait times. Forget instant gratification, we're talking years, people, years of your life spent in agonizing anticipation while your dreams of home ownership slowly morph into a recurring nightmare about mortgage rates. COE. Can't own expensive. Look, I get it. Public transport in Singapore is the envy of the world, a glorious air-conditioned symphony of efficiency. But sometimes you just want to feel the wind in your hair. Or at least you would if owning a car in this country wasn't more expensive than dining with Elon Musk on the moon. Enter the COE, or Certificate of Entitlement, a piece of paper that gives you the astounding privilege of existing on the same roads as a Toyota Corolla. This little piece of paper, by the way, can cost more than the actual car itself. You heard me right. You're essentially paying for the right to breathe exhaust fumes in the general vicinity of your own vehicle. It's enough to make you want to strap a saddle on a stray Merlion and gallop down the East Coast Parkway screaming freedom. The leasehold life. Everything's temporary. Here's a fun fact for you. In Singapore, nothing lasts forever, not even your meticulously curated Instagram feed. Remember that HDB flat you poured your heart, soul, and life savings into? Well, surprise, it's on a 99-year lease. That's right, you're basically renting from the government for a century. And that fancy car you bought with your hard-earned and heavily taxed income? Well, after 10 years, you get to make a delightful choice. Scrap it or pay an exorbitant fee to renew the COE. It's like playing a real-life game of Monopoly. Except the bank always wins, and you're constantly on the verge of landing on boardwalk with a hotel. First world problems, a high price for a high ranking. We're constantly being told that Singapore is a shining beacon of success, a first world oasis in a sea of developing nations. And on paper, it's hard to argue with the facts. We've got a ridiculously low crime rate, sparkling clean streets, and a public transport system that could navigate a plate of char kway teow without spilling a single noodle. But at what cost, my friends? While we're busy patting ourselves on the back for achieving peak first world status, are we overlooking the elephant in the room? Or rather, the stressed out, sleep-deprived, financially burdened Singaporean in the room? Are we so busy chasing that elusive Singapore dream that we've forgotten what it means to actually live? 5 million little islands, life in a crowded paradise. Let's talk about space, or rather, the distinct lack thereof. Singapore is a tiny island nation, and with a population of over 5 million plus people, it often feels like we're all crammed onto a very well-organized life raft. Personal space is a luxury few can afford, and even breathing room seems to be in short supply. Want to go for a jog without dodging pedestrians, strollers, and the occasional rogue e-scooter? Good luck trying to find a seat on the MRT during rush hour? Prepare to engage in some passive-aggressive elbow warfare. The foreign factor friends or frenemies of affordability. Now, before you brand me a xenophobic monster, let me be clear. Singapore wouldn't be the same without its diverse population. But it's also undeniable that the influx of foreigners has put a strain on our resources, housing, and yes, even our cost of living. With more people vying for the same limited resources, prices inevitably go up. It's basic economics, folks. And while blaming foreigners for all our problems is neither accurate nor fair, it's a conversation we need to have. The price of survival. When daily necessities become luxuries, Remember when a simple bowl of noodles used to cost a couple of bucks? These days, even the most basic necessities seem to be infected with the dreaded Singapore price hike. After COVID-19 and our GST increased, some of our basic necessities are increased 50% or more. A decent cup of coffee? Better take out a small loan. Our GST vouchers or CDC vouchers can only help that much for the lower income group. Even the middle income family is feeling the heat. Singapore's healthcare system is often lauded as a model for the world, and while it's true that we have access to world-class medical facilities and treatment, it often feels like we're paying an arm and a leg for the privilege if you are not properly insured. What if you cannot afford insurance? From sky-high hospital bills to exorbitant specialist fees, staying healthy in Singapore can feel like a part-time job. In Singapore, education is king. From the moment we pop out of the womb, we're groomed to be exam-taking, tuition-attending, grade-obsessed machines. And while there's no denying the importance of a good education, the cost of getting one can be staggering. From primary school to university, parents are shelling out astronomical sums of money, all in the hopes of securing their children's future. But is it worth it? And at what cost to our sanity and bank accounts? So, is the Singapore dream worth the high cost of living? Look, there's no easy answer. We've built an incredible nation, but it's come at a price. And if we're not careful, that price could be our collective soul. We need to have an honest conversation about the trade-offs we're making and find a way to create a sustainable future for all Singaporeans, not just the ones who can afford it. Otherwise, we risk becoming a nation of stressed-out, cash-strapped automatons, forever chasing an ever-elusive dream.